welcome to the 2019 edition of Reclaiming My Mind. I hope that everyone had a nice holiday season and a good new year. We are super excited to be back and interviewing candidates. More recently, we're going to be interviewing a whole slew of municipal candidates since on March 5th, 2019, we'll be holding Tampa city elections and re-electing all of our city council and re-electing our mayor. So we're super excited about that. Again, I'm your host, Jessica Vaughn. I'm also the president of the Democratic Progressive Caucus of Tampa Bay. I'm recovering from the flu, so excuse me if my voice sounds different than normal, but hopefully we'll be able to get through this interview. Luckily, today we have our first municipal candidate, Ed Turanchik, who's running for mayor. Thank you so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to it, and
I'm super excited to interview you, and thank you for agreeing right away. So the first thing I like to do with any of our guests, aside from just jumping into politics, is learn a little bit about you, your background, as much as you want to share, so people get a feel for you and who you are as a person other than just a candidate. So tell me about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm 63. Mm-hmm. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio. I moved here 31 years ago. I have my undergraduate degree is in zoology, my master's degree in evolutionary biology, and I have a law degree. And I came down here to practice law, but immediately became a lead Sierra Club activist.
And so for people who aren't familiar with the Sierra Club, that's an environmental group.
Yeah, it's the preeminent environmental group in Florida, I think. And I got involved in fighting against sprawl, and was the head of the local conservation committee, actually also the Sierra Club political committee that got Phyllis Busansky elected a long time ago. And my work here ended up having me chair the state Sierra Club growth management committee, because back then Florida used to care about growth management. And we went through a lot of battles. In fact, I just had this big environmental fundraiser today with all the leadership of the Sierra Club, and we were recounting those days when we reframed the conversation here through grassroots campaign. I got elected, and Sylvia Kimball got elected, and Phyllis Busansky got elected. And we've had a recent success, of course, with Kim Overman, and Mary Ella Smith, and Pat Kemp.
Right.
But through that environmental activism, it kind of propelled me to prominence, and I ran and won in 1990
for county commission.
For the county commission, and I served there for 8 years, and led a very strong agenda for transit and health care, civil rights. We created the urban service areas. I actually sponsored that, which are still in place today. We created a program, the expanded ELAP program, that
ELAP?
Environmental Lands Acquisition Program.
Oh, okay.
In 1990, I led a committee of Sierra Club volunteers, which nominated 30,000 acres of environmental lands. And we said, look, we need to expand the environmental lands program to save that. And the county commission agreed and put it to the voters, and that passed. And we've now saved 65,000 acres of environmental lands. I realized back then that sprawl was we couldn't manage all the growth.
Meaning when we extend communities or build new housing developments, all of the
farther and farther
and
away,
all of the schools that go into that, and all of the shopping communities, and how we just keep growing exponentially outward. Right.
In an unsustainable way, because all those cars can't get on a 2-lane or 4-lane road.
Which I live in Bruce B. Downs, and it's been under construction for 10 years
well,
because
we're
of
going to talk
Tampa.
about the GO plan that's going to help you. But that led me to being a transit advocate and pushing forth the first rail plans, the regional rail plans that I championed for 8 years. Got the name Choo Choo Turanchik because I was the only person back then pushing rail. I had a lot of citizen support and business community support, but not elected officials support. So that's kind of my background. I left the county commission and ran the Florida Olympic bid, which was united the whole region and created a big vision for downtown revitalization. We didn't win the Olympic Games, in case people missed that. And I started an urban development company to recreate our center city. Had an affordable home building company where we built 55 really incredible affordable homes in Old West Tampa before the Depression. Then we elected President Obama, and he said, we got $8 billion for high-speed rail. No one was doing anything about that. And because I had worked on prior high-speed rail stuff, I said, well, let's go get the money. And we put together a statewide coalition to go get the money, and then Governor Scott killed it. Right?
Yes, I was at that protest.
It was just unbelievable. That was, to bring it to fruition, I've always been involved in the civic arena. And one of the things I've done as a private citizen is develop the ferry concept of using Tampa Bay for moving people around Tampa Bay because it's a cheap, congestion-proof option. And here I am. I've been at it for 30 years, and I'm running to bring it all home, to realize these goals of building a sustainable, environmentally friendly community.
So you ran for mayor 8 years ago.
I did.
And now you're running again. So what is it specifically about being mayor? Because it seems that you could have, again, run for county commission, or you kind of, in between. It sounds like you were busy making sure that you were kind of running companies that would help build the infrastructure. But what is it about mayor specifically that you feel passionate about running for?
Well, we have a strong mayor form of government. And what the mayor does in terms of transportation and urban development and housing drives so much. I learned, I was the driving force to have the arena built in downtown versus on Dale Mabry. And Sandy Friedman was the mayor then. I had to overcome resistance by her.
Do you mean the hockey arena?
The hockey arena. Thank you. And so I'm a strong urbanist. Being able to bring all this experience of transportation and environmental protection and affordable housing together in a strong mayor form of government where the mayor understands how these pieces fit together, we can move so much faster to get things done that we have struggled for the last 20 years to get done. Because we've had, I think, well-meaning people in the mayor's office, but they have not had the breadth of knowledge or experience to put the pieces together to understand how transit and affordable housing and environmental protection and improving, importantly, urban public schools are all part of city building. And that's why I have this passion for it. I have a 30-year passion for doing this. And, when I announced my mayor's campaign this time, I said, I want to bring it home. And then Andrew Gilliland said, he wants to bring it home. I said, darn, that guy took my line. But I think it's the same motivation that he had and I have of bringing all these best separate strands together to build a more humane, progressive, functional, sustainable city in this case. I think he was trying to do that for the state of Florida. And I was the only candidate in the mayor's race at the time that in the primary supported him. So I don't necessarily go with conventional wisdom. I will go with my heart. And no one thought he could win, but he moved my heart and my soul. And I said, darn, he didn't win,
Well, I don't think we've heard the last of him, but that's a whole show in itself. So to me, what I'm hearing, because my next question was, what's your platform? And it sounds like it's, obviously making sure that we're building the infrastructure in the city. You've talked about affordable housing, transit. What else do you see that we might not have talked about specifically at the forefront of your platform when people are, trying to differentiate you between the other candidates?
Well, I think the starting point is a record of visionary leadership. It's hard to sort through a crowded field. Everyone's saying the same things. They're saying the same words. I understand what these words mean in very real terms and have a record of working on them for 30 years. So it's no sudden convenience. I haven't changed parties to, now I didn't go from a Republican to being a Democrat. There's four let me weave these things together. Right?
Okay.
So, and I know we're going to talk about this, but the voters did an extraordinary thing last November to pass a very large tax increase to fund transportation, even though there wasn't any project plans behind it.
Right.
So it's an incredible leap of faith that we're going to get it right.
Right.
My platform focuses around a thing I call the GO plan.
Oh, good. That's one of my questions coming up.
Yeah, which is an incredible transit system that connects people from Port Tampa to New Tampa, from East Tampa to West Shore in a seamless way. We have tried to do lines, like we'll do a line. A line doesn't work here because we're so spread out. We need to do a system. And so this is a 107-mile system that we can build for a fraction of the cost of anything ever proposed, and we can have it running in 5 years, given that the voters took this leap of faith. And it's very important to deliver on that. People want better transit, better quality of life, and transit that serves their needs, not developer or lobbyist or consultants' needs.
Sure.
So the starting point is the GO plan, and that's what we build our future around. We build higher density housing on and affordable housing, and as a condition of having higher density housing, developers are going to be required to provide low and workforce housing in everything they do. And they will do it because we're going to create a great transit system where buses or rail or whatever it is run at least every 10 minutes. The third part of this is pushing an innovation economy. As much as we have had seeming economic success, we have the lowest average wage of the top 25 metro areas. And the recent report said this is the one, we rank 49th out of 50th of the cost of living here for the average family.
Sure.
I mean, it's expensive because the housing is expensive, the wages are low, and the transit system is terrible.
Yes.
The GO plan, coupled with high quality transit oriented design that has requirements for developers to build affordable housing in it as a condition of getting a building permit, also creates place, also creates a livable community that people want to be. The missing element of this, though, is the quality of education of our schools. I am very, very concerned that we're going into a world where there's too many children being left behind.
Sure.
So I've been amazed in the last 30 years that no mayor has made the quality of public education and the opportunities provided for children as a priority for them.
Well, I've had other candidates on for different facets, and they make the excuse or say that, because there's a school board, they feel they have such limited control over that they're disconnected from the education. So they can't really put it at the forefront of their platform. But I do want to follow up with just a couple questions for the GO plan. Is one, it's confusing because I love the idea of saying that in order to get a permit for developers to develop, part of the permit means that they have to provide affordable housing in that permit.
Yes.
Now, is that something that you can do alone, or is that something that you'd need to partner with City Council so that's something that you would have to partner with City Council with?
I mean, all of this stuff is a we, but the mayor provides the vision and the leadership fearlessly, so courageously so. If the mayor is not willing to do that, council's not going to do that. So I'm going to set a high bar. And I've been in the development business. I understand the business. And I've talked to large private developers. And if you tell them going in as a condition, before they buy the property, they know that this is what you have to do to get from 4 units per acre to 80 units per acre, they can build that into their financial performance and their business model, right? The problem is when you go in after the fact and give them a set of rules and regulations, which can destroy their business model, and then it all of a sudden doesn't become doable. So I understand a fair amount about the economics of urban development because I did it for 10 years. And so that's another reason why it's important to elect me as mayor, because the things I'm saying are rooted in the marketplace and business.
Right.
So what you want to do is get the business model lined up with the social and environmental and transit model.
Right.
So it happens.
Sure. So one of my listeners' questions was actually about the GO plan. And I'm not sure. Essentially, she was asking, since it's a multifaceted comprehension approach, how will it be accepted by and interfaced with FDOT, TBN, NEX, Heart of the world, especially from a COT catbird seat? I didn't even fully understand the question.
I have vast experience in dealing with transportation agencies. I'm the only person in the state of Florida that has won the National Leadership Award from the National Association of Metropolitan Planning Organizations. For the listeners, it means I am the consummate transportation geek. Okay. I have worked with FDOT on high-speed rail, and I know this topic in and out, like education and how to teach a child. It's what you do. It's what I do. I have very strong relations with the newly elected county commissioners and Heart Board and know it inside and out. So it is actually far easier than one might imagine because, and for the benefit of the listeners, let me describe the GO plan so people understand it.
Okay.
The green line, I call it, would run from Port Tampa all the way to New Tampa.
So would this be a bus, a light rail, either one?
It is using the CSX tracks on 18 miles, using a train that would work on them. It's not light rail because light rail you can't operate in that corridor. It's a thing called diesel multiple unit. We ran such a train here in 1997 for a month from Hyde Park to Ybor City. It was chocked full of people. It was so easy to do. Yet we've had a generation of public officials turn their back on the easy and the practical and the immediate to pursue very complicated ideas. And light rail's very expensive now. It's over $100 million per mile. It can take 10 to 12 years to do, whereas using the CSX tracks with this technology that works on it can be done in 3 years and for under $20 million per mile. So from USF, so the CSX lines runs from Port Tampa to USF, and from USF up through New Tampa, we would use a new technology, a new autonomous high-capacity tram. So that's one line. Another line runs from downtown to West Shore, using an alignment that was identified in 2001 by a study I started in 1996 or helped start.
So is this another CSS?
No, this is all in-the-street dedicated transit that would run from downtown to West Shore. So
I'm sorry, I'm not as familiar with transportation terms. In the street meaning buses
yes, in this case, it would be you can go to Tampa2020.com, and that website's still being developed, but to see these routes and these technologies, but it would be a modern day tram. It runs on rubber wheels. It looks like light rail. For the average eye, you would say, oh, that's a light rail thing. Oh, okay. Except it's not.
I see.
But it has all the features of light rail.
But its own dedicated line somewhere.
It would be for transit and bikes only.
I see.
The green line is transit and bikes only. The other line would be the Heights line, following the Florida Tampa pairs in the street, dedicated lines running up through Tampa Heights and Seminole Heights up to USF. So there'd be two separate north-south corridors, one through East Tampa, which would be fabulous for East Tampa, and it's consistent with my New Day agenda for the Black community, which we can talk about, and the other line up the Heights, connecting to this east-west line. There are two more lines that feed into this. One is along MLK. It connects East Tampa to St. Joe's and HCC and the West Shore.
Now, this is another green trail, or this is more?
This would be in the street because there's no right-of-way, but using electric buses. And the other piece would be combination in the street and in dedicated corridors. I call the health line. It connects all these pieces to St. Joseph Hospital and Tampa General. And this has been for 25 years. People have ignored this very important need. Both of those are major employers. They have a lot of nurses and administrative staff who, to find housing, live farther and farther away. This would be a great transit system to connect near-town neighborhoods to them. More importantly, that means West Tampa, Forest Hills.
Did you mention the airport?
All these connect to the airport as well, right? From the West Shore Multimodal Terminal.
Gotcha.
But the airport's not an important day-to-day destination, except for the employees. Most people go to the airport once or twice or three times.
I just think of people coming in, not renting cars, wanting to, tourism, people wanting to come in and realize they don't have to rent a car. Having an option from the airport is.
It is true, but my priority is building transit for us.
Right.
Not for tourists, but for people who live and work here and need health care. And the health line's really important because it connects people to St. Joseph and Tampa General. And I've talked to the president of St. Joseph who said one of the barriers to medical treatment and decent medical care is transportation.
Sure.
People will miss an appointment, they'll miss a test, and treatment delayed is really problematic and costly for our healthcare system. So this health line does a remarkable job of connecting people in this system to those two important hospitals. And the green line connects people to veterans, the VA, to Florida Hospital. So it's a system.
Right.
We need a system we can afford. And my goal, and I can tell you how to do it if everyone cooperates and says, let's do it.
Well, that's a tricky piece right there.
But it's the people shall perish without vision. And so we can have this in place, this whole system in place, given the voters' decision in November. We can have this whole thing in place in 5 years.
So that's what we would use as a source of funding?
Yes.
Because, of course, that's going to be everyone's number one question when you talk about such a wide-scale plan is how would we pay for that?
And I strongly defend the voters' decision. It's remarkable to me that they took that leap of faith. It's exciting to no end that they took that leap of faith. And it was hard for me to get there because I know how government has worked and how we have not done the obvious. And I see consultants and lobbyists driving the train and coming up with multi-billion-dollar projects that benefit consultants and benefit developers, but don't help average working people.
Absolutely.
So
So what I'm a little confused about, and I think what a lot of our listeners from the questions that I got are confused about, and some of the questions that I'm going to talk about that came from the listeners will address this more, is, as far as I've known, and when I supported you in your last mayoral race, you have always been the transportation advocate. And so I know when you'd come to our Progressive Caucus meeting, and on record a few times that you were a proponent of this tax originally, and outspoken out against it. No, more recently, the 2018 transportation tax. So I think a lot of people from the questions that I got and listeners and just feedback that I've gotten people are confused as to why, someone who is such a strong transit advocate and understands our limited funding on transit that we've been working with this small budget to try to meet our needs, could be opposed to this tax that we were trying to raise on the ballot.
I think that's totally understandable. And the proponents came to me and asked me to support it. And I said, I am uncomfortable supporting a big tax without a plan.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason for that is what I said before. We've had 2 transportation plans
Mm-hmm.
that would have spent billions of dollars that wouldn't have solved the problems and needs or meet the needs of working families.
Mm-hmm.
This is not any political rhetoric. It's a fact. Let's take just one example. All right. The West Shore Business District's our biggest district.
Mm-hmm.
40% of the trips into the West Shore Business District that come from Hillsborough County come from Town and Country and West Chase. All right.
Mm.
They're not City of Tampa constituents, although I did used to represent them as a county commissioner.
Mm-hmm.
We've had 2 successive transportation plans that didn't help those people at all.
Mm-hmm.
Not a lick. We've had 2 multi-billion-dollar transportation plans that did not meet the commuting needs of people in South Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
We've had 2 transportation plans that didn't meet the community needs of people from Brandon. The last plan, the 2016 plan, didn't do anything to help people in that was meaningful, not like the GO plan would be in East Tampa or New Tampa.
So what I'm understanding is your concern was that you didn't know exactly what you'd be supporting since there wasn't any plan that you could stand behind as far as asking the voters to pass that tax?
And maybe even a little worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
The track record of producing plans that help people have been not very good.
Mm-hmm.
Spending over $2 billion on light rail that serves a very limited number of people. I know people got excited about that.
Sure, I love light rail.
But, well, I think what people love is the mobility and certainty it provides.
Mm-hmm.
But when it's so expensive that it takes money away from other transit needs and only serves a small portion of the population,
right,
it becomes problematic. It's hugely problematic from a equality and equal justice perspective.
Mm-hmm.
In Atlanta, there was this massive regional transportation plan.
Or BART? What is
Well,
BART?
they put it to the vote, and it was a very odd, seemingly odd combination of environmentalists and Tea Party advocates that campaigned against that and defeated it because they saw it as a lot of money going in to benefit a very few people.
So let me ask you, what would have happened? Because I understand what you're saying. You know, you were concerned about the details of it. Had it not passed and you were running as a mayoral candidate, where would you have found the funds to support this?
We would be on the ballot in 2020 with something like the GO plan to say, here's what we're going to do with these funds if you approve them. But the press reports on this have been a bit incorrect. I did not urge people to vote against it. I did not oppose it. I told the proponents of it, I think I give you full
credit.
Well, yes, credit, but also go give it a shot, right? Maybe the way to get people to get to the point of voting for a very significant tax was not to have a plan.
Right.
And, you know, as a longtime I know this is difficult for people to grasp, but
Sure.
You just got to understand my background coming from environmental activism and very skeptical about lobbyists and consultants and seeing them getting their hooks into money that's not attached to the plan. I mean, that's a legitimate fear because I've seen it happen too many times.
Well,
but we are where we are.
Right.
And the voters said yes. And I'm like, wow, that's pretty amazing. So let's go get it done. And so I'm committed to give the voters a plan that fulfills what they thought they voted for.
Right. So tell me a little bit, because this is where I get confused, is so the transit tax passed and then Stacey White started a lawsuit to try to, now help me out with the details because I'm not as passionately educated as so many other people, because I was working my butt off for Andrew Gillum. But anyway, so Stacey White then came out with a lawsuit to try to stop the transit funds and plans. Is that correct?
Well, I'm not intimately familiar with it. He's challenging elements of how whether the charter and the state law works together. The fact that I wish he hadn't done it, right? But he has, so we now need to get it resolved and get it resolved swiftly.
So you're not a supporter of that? Because that's where it gets confusing. Because you see things on Facebook, and there were people who were saying that you were a proponent of that lawsuit, or that there was some statement that you made that seemed to somehow agree to that lawsuit.
Here's what I've said, and it's an absolute true statement.
Yeah.
For you to go and bond the revenue to build systems, you're going to have to go to court and get it validated. So let's go get it validated and put this to bed because it'll provide absolute certainty. It's that simple.
So just clarity, you're a huge proponent now that this has been passed. You don't want to stop the transportation funding in any way. Right. You're not allying with Stacey White in any way, shape, or form.
I've urged him and the people involved in it to put it to bed and settle it. The people have voted. We need, if there's technical issues that need to be cleaned up, and I believe people think there might be.
Sure.
Let's get them done so we can move forward. I probably might be more effective in getting this put to bed than anyone else that's there so we can move on with it. The GO plan, what I'm basing my campaign on, counts on those revenues to be available to do what I think we should do. So it would be fairly obtuse and bizarre that I'd want the lawsuit to succeed when I'm trying to base a future on
the revenue
revenues.
From that. So
does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah. Okay. And I wanted, one of the reasons I don't shy away from these questions isn't because I enjoy putting people on the spot or anything like that, but I want candidates to have a chance to talk about some of the misinformation or respond to criticisms, or have people have an opportunity to, be able to understand some of the rhetoric behind what gets easily spread all over the internet or Facebook.
And I remember the first mayoral debate or second mayoral debate in October when they were asking about the regional bus rapid transit thing, which to me is a idea that makes zero sense. And one of the candidates, Jane Castor, said, well, I think maybe we should do it and we should build hubs. Well, these hubs are 9,000 car parking garages that you would build first to connect to transit that might move 200 people an hour. What are you talking about? That makes no sense. So here you have a leading candidate for mayor talking about spending tax dollars on something that makes no sense and doesn't serve our local community. And knowing the issues like I know them, it's scary. Another candidate in this, Harry Cohen, who, and by the way, both of these candidates are now saying, well, let's do the CSX tracks, right? Which I've been pushing for forever. For 4 or 5 years, Harry was supportive of the TBX thing and wanted to take it forward. And the CSX came forward and said, here's our tracks. Pat Kemp was pushing for it. No one in the public side, except Pat Kemp and me on the private side, were saying, let's go do the CSX things. Now that seems to be in vogue, which I'm great.
Sure.
Absolutely great. Let's get going.
Right. So one of the other things that I've seen on the internet and that someone has asked me about, and I'm going to go ahead and ask you about as far as clarification, that seems to go along with these, was Turanchik anti-transportation tax, and then was he supportive of Stacey White, is something in some sort of way of receiving some campaign money from, I guess, Martin Garcia, who I'm not that familiar with.
Sure.
But seems to be a leading player in the Republican Party, and it might even, I don't know if he represents you or if he just gave you a large campaign contribution. And I think people are concerned, and what the feeling is, there was Ed, and he was so passionate about transportation. Then all of a sudden it seems like, things started to change, and then it always follow the money.
No, I know. And then you got to understand some of it's being spun by your
opponents
campaign.
Or whomever.
So Martin Garcia and my wife went to middle school together. I've known Martin for 30 years. Martin made this contribution to my campaign 3 months, 4 months before there was even a referendum. And so he believes to me to be an honest, forthright public servant that will be direct with people and do what's in the public interest. So we've been friends, and he trusts that I will be a fair, honest public official. I also pointed out that I have another major contributor, Daryl Shaw, who put $70,000 into All for Transportation. So I have people, both supporters and proponents, and supporters and opponents of the referendum, who have donated generously to me through my political committee. I think people who know me, I am kind of beyond being influenced by political contributions. I have this strain of me in my DNA of being an urbanist and transit and environmental advocate, and I'm pretty driven about those things. So I understand that people are concerned about that, but I appreciate the question. The fact that Pat Kemp and Mariella Smith, two of the strongest, most progressive environmental voices, are up there telling everyone, vote for Ed Turanchik.
And they are, relentlessly.
Because we understand that if I'm mayor and they are where they are, we're going to be able to do spectacular things to move our community forward. And they know the other people, and they have said, go with Ed, because we need to get going.
So one of the things that I've also heard that I'm just confused about, and I've heard you say things that I like that sound very progressive, like, we can't allow the lobbyists and the corporations to really, dictate our, infrastructure and our transportation needs, because, it's at their own interest and not the interest of serving all the members of our community is what I get. Are you a lobbyist? Do you work for a lobbyist company? Have you been a lobbyist?
No, I'm not a lobbyist. I'm an attorney.
Okay.
I've been an attorney forever. And the ferry plan, for instance, is something that I developed and conceived of and hooked up with HMS Ferries, which is the largest water transit operator in the world. In Hillsborough County, though, when you are a lawyer or not, and you're representing a principal, you have to sign up as a lobbyist.
Gotcha.
So if you, for instance, were to represent your husband, you would be a lobbyist.
Gotcha.
So I am a lawyer. I make my living working on behalf of clients, typically in land use or public-private partnerships. But by the way, I do this in other places, and I'm not a lobbyist under their rules. But in Hillsborough County, because whenever you represent a client and are standing before any person in county government, you have to sign up and register as a lobbyist. So,
so you're a lobbyist technically, but only because Hillsborough County mandates that by representing your clients. Anytime you represent a client,
and that's that's just true. What the government defines you as that, but I don't.
Well, we're almost getting to the end of the uncomfortable listener questions.
No, I think there's no such thing as an uncomfortable question. When you're running and seeking to become the leader of
a pretty big city.
City. Every question is fair. And I have always responded to questions fully and forthrightly. I think it's unfortunate when, and there are some people in this race, when faced by questions like, did you unfairly target blacks on bicycles, black people on bicycles?
Who could you be talking about?
Dodged that issue for 3 weeks and then submitted written questions. It's all fair game.
Sure.
All this is fair, and I welcome all the questions people have.
So we kind of already covered them, but I just want to clarify. You used to be an advocate of light rail, but now that's kind of changed because you realize how expensive it is and that there are other opportunities, other transit options that would be more affordable.
Let me clarify that.
Okay.
I proposed use of CSX tracks on June 13th of 1991.
Okay.
Using a technology that would work on those because it was so cheap and easy to do.
So you were never a light rail advocate.
I have been on certain corridors. My co-sponsor of that was State Senator James Hargret, an African-American, well-respected state senator from East Tampa. He and I together proposed doing this. So we worked it. I carried the water on it for a long time.
No pun intended, very
and the frustrating thing is that we turned our back on it. And I could bore the listeners with how that happened.
Sure.
But I just saw consultants get in and take it over. And that's the danger of having a mayor who doesn't understand enough about city building that they turn it over. Oh, this lobbyist says this. I trust this lobbyist or consultant. And you go down the path of silliness.
Of selling out.
I don't think it's selling out. I think they just don't know any better. I mean, or they're trusting these people. Right. And so you got to be able to discern. Right. And I can tell you curdling stories about how this stuff went awry. So to correct the record, I've been always in favor of using the CSX tracks. I like incremental expansions of the streetcar. I like bus rapid transit in those corridors where it makes sense.
Right.
The GO plan is not one size fits all. It's use the best fit technology to meet the needs of working families, get from where they live to where they work or go to school or go to the hospital.
And do you think expanding the streetcar into Tampa Heights or Seminole Heights would be part of that plan?
I think, I do. I think there is a technical thing we're going to have to work through between expanding the streetcar and this tram system. And the key to the GO plan is turning Polk into a transit way. So all that transit flows through there. And I was talking to Mike English the other day, who is the father of the streetcar. And we spent a 2-hour time period talking about this. And Mike said, well, maybe it might not make sense to do that, but that's a detail we have to work through.
So now I'm going to kind of talk about some of the issues that, as the progressive president of the local chapter, are important to me. And the first one is public education, which you mentioned you feel as mayor should be on the radar and something that you feel passionate about.
Top 4.
So tell me a little bit more about that and how you see that as far as being elected mayor and how you could influence and how you feel about public education and charter schools and privatization.
Well, I don't know as much about education as you do. Okay. But when I got into the water wars, I didn't know anything about that. And in a period of 3 years, we went from fighting to solving them. I didn't know anything about criminal justice reform, but we never built the jail that the sheriff did and instead did alternatives to incarceration and drug treatment programs, and I led that effort. In this case, I know that the problems facing our schools, the center city schools, go beyond what happens in the classroom. It's before school, it's after school, it's during vacation. Tammy Schamberger talks about wraparound issues. If you are in a family that changes your apartment 3 times in the year and go to 3 different school districts, I don't care who you are.
Right.
That's going to disrupt that child's life and the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to put together an urban schools policy committee that, first of all, identifies the challenges we face. And the goal is we can't have DNF schools in our center city. Mm-hmm. It's unacceptable. It's immoral. It's unrighteous. Mm-hmm. Why is that happening? What's the nature of the problem? And then us collectively have a shared vision of what we want. And then work the problem to get there. And you have to bring everyone to the table. And I don't have any foreordained views. I view myself as a convener and bringing the mayor's voice to saying, this is unacceptable. I'm very concerned about the lack of accountability of charter schools. Mm-hmm. I also understand the parents' desire, if there's a failing or poor public school, to say, I'm not going to wait till that changes. I'm going to have my kids go someplace else. Mm-hmm. So I think it's a very complex issue. But I think we as a republic have a very strong need to have a foundation that unites us. And I think public education for 100 years has provided us with that foundation, just like collective bargaining has created the middle class. Mm-hmm. So I go into a very strong bias, if you want, predilection, that public education is the right answer. Mm-hmm. But there may be circumstances where it's not.
So you've touched on some things that are important. Workers' rights and union rights are on my list. So you've mentioned that. So I'm assuming that you're a supporter of unions and workers' rights.
It really is what's made America great. It's made collective bargaining made the middle class.
Absolutely. And gave us so many things that we take for granted and just regular the job place protection. And so how about, and I know we kind of talked about this, and as a representative of the entire city, you're hesitant necessarily to take a stance on things that you don't feel are under the scope because you're very focused on the things that would be in your job description. Yes. But when we're talking about access to healthcare, and now there's this huge push, especially recently, there's going to be all of these petitions for Medicare for all. And on the national level, it's starting to be something that all Democrats are uniting behind and starting to push forward. And it's just really just talking about, healthcare being a human right and access to medical needs. Is that something that you would say you're a supporter of?
Well, I think that me and Phyllis Busansky and the county commissioner in 1991 beat everyone to the punch. Phyllis Busansky brought forward the Hillsborough County Healthcare Plan. Mm. We went with her leadership. I supported it. It was her idea, but I totally supported it. I was a wingman in this case for her. We went and got the authorization to pass a 0.5-cent sales tax for indigent healthcare, which we then did without a referendum. 6-1 vote by Hillsborough County to create the only low-income healthcare program in the state of Florida. And it's treated, I think, 800,000 people now. So I have been on record for 27 years of supporting a program that today in Hillsborough County, if you're not covered by Medicare or Medicaid and you're a resident of the county and you're at or below 125% of federal poverty guidelines, your health care is covered. So we are way ahead of everyone. We need universal health care. I'm not sure what the answer is to get it, but when I had a chance to act, we acted. We taxed our citizens ourselves and created the best low-income health care program probably in the Southeast United States.
Well, that answers that question. And this is another one you might not see in your scope, but I do see that we've voted on this both at the city level and in Hillsborough County. As far as there was medical marijuana passed, and now there's all these discussions about how many dispensaries we should have, and the industry has become very convoluted. But in general, would you say that you support adult use recreational marijuana?
Well, first, let me talk about the first issue.
Sure.
I think that we've gotten into, this is where the lobbyists came in, by the way. Medical marijuana is a legal right now in the state of Florida. You shouldn't have to get a license to sell it in Hillsborough County. There should be locational criteria, just like there are for gas stations and everything else. And you should, the marketplace should work. Here's a very interesting thing where progressives and a conservative like Jeff Brandes agree, right? It's legal. Why do you have to go and have the right to sell medical marijuana dispersed and regulated by the county? It's because lobbyists got in there and limited that. And it was really a convoluted thing. Pat Kemp, I think, voted against it. Maybe one or two other people. But the lobbyists did that, right? So adult use marijuana, I don't know the answer to that. The bigger question.
Well, normally we would say recreational, but advocates in the community have been very clear to change the terminology to make sure that it's clear that it's adult use as opposed to the word recreational being more.
I really don't like criminalization of addiction. First of all, let's be clear about that. I think we have ruined a generation or more of Americans by criminalizing drug use and addiction, right? The question for me about whether or not you make medical marijuana legal for everyone.
Well, adults.
No, I get that. I get that. I understand the impulse about that. I don't understand. I mean, I've had people in addiction treatment programs say that's a bad idea. My family has had challenges. Every family has with addiction.
Sure.
And so my reticence goes to that question. So I don't know. I just don't know the answer to it. I think we need to be careful. But there's a lot of experiments happening right now. And so we'll see what happens in those other states in terms of how that's working with the general society. It's not that I'm opposed or in favor, but if you're asking me as a mayor, would I say X, Y, or Z right now? I'd say, I don't know.
Okay, fair enough. How about $15 an hour? What do you feel about that?
Well, I think the minimum wage has to go up. I don't know how you get there. Is that the right number? I'm a scientist and a lawyer, but we need to raise the minimum wage.
Yeah.
I think it's going to take a constitutional amendment to do it. Where we go to is a fair question, but Disney announced $15.
Amazon too, I think, right?
Amazon.
All of Washington State, I believe, is $15 an hour.
We may see the marketplace handle that, just like solar energy is like breaking down fossil fuel prices. So the marketplace may start dealing with that. But we need to raise the standard for working people. And so where you get to, clearly someday you get to 15. I don't know the answer to that, except we need to start boosting it up. And I would be in support of, well, right now we can't do anything because our hands are tied by the legislature. I would be in favor of a statewide effort to increase the minimum wage.
Well, there is. There's Fight for 15.
Well, I didn't know that. I don't know. I might get behind that. I don't know.
Okay, awesome. Well, then I will put you in touch with some people from Fight for 15.
Sure.
Some good people. So I have two more kind of issue-based questions. And then I want to talk, because I know that you said that you had felt really excited about partnering or some visions with the African-American community, and racial justice is on my list. So we'll kind of save that for the last. Okay. The other two questions the issues that I kind of want to talk about were And this is one, it's interesting. I've asked all of my guests and it kind of caught them off guard. And I don't see a lot of people necessarily talking about it, especially from like one Democrat to another. But even more of recently, there's been a Democrat who has proposed something as far as mandating Bible study in schools now at the state level. And one thing that I always ask my guests about is just kind of their commitment or how they feel regarding the separation between church and state.
I'm a very strong civil libertarian. My law professor in law school was David Goldberger, who became famous for representing the right of Nazis to march in Skokie, Illinois, when he was representing the ACLU. Mm-hmm. I take the First Amendment as the foundation for our society.
So wait, are you a libertarian?
Civil libertarian. Civil libertarian. So I think that certainly if schools want to do Bible study, studying Bible or the Quran or whatever.
Religious studies in general.
Religious studies, that'd be great. I think that's very helpful. But we can't have public schools getting into the business of
mandating one religion over the other.
No. I mean, look, my kids went to Catholic school. That's a matter of choice, right? And that's my choice.
Sure.
I don't want some government bureaucrat deciding whose religion gets taught to children in public schools. It's that simple.
I agree. Okay. And so since you are a civil libertarian, my last question is about gun reform. How do you feel about gun reform?
Well, of course, the Florida Constitution and the Florida legislature have tied local government's hands on that. I would like to see local governments have more control over it. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't think it's a proper thing that an average citizen can buy a military-grade weapon that can kill 100 people in a minute.
Right.
So we need some kind of approach that is sensible and does not allow weapons of mass destruction.
I know that county commission did something with Les Miller did
waiting
something.
Period. They were allowed to work within the context of existing state law. There's a really big effort underway by legislatures around the country to rein in what local governments can do. And it's often conservative legislators and tours curtailing the abilities of cities to regulate things, which is kind of a strange thing because you can make the contrary argument to let cities do what they want. And those that come up with XYZ policy, if that's what the marketplace likes, then great, right? I mean, if one city wanted, it's, let cities experiment. But that's not the trend,
right?
Unfortunately.
Oh, so much bureaucracy on where the power structure lies. It's always trying to change hands. But that does help me get some stance on how you feel regarding that question. And so the last thing I kind of want to talk about, on my list was racial justice. And I know when you came in, you said that you wanted to kind of talk about your relationship and your plans for, marginalized communities and the African-American communities. I think it's interesting that I see a lot of candidates now, which I hadn't seen before, taking more of an interest in our marginalized communities and specifically, East Tampa and Sulphur Springs. And I think that the feeling that I get from a lot of the members of those communities is, is this just an interest for an election time? Is this, a genuine, a genuine interest?
Sure.
So tell me about that. And
so they should be skeptical because I think year in and year out, the predominantly black communities in East Tampa and West Tampa have been led to believe certain things would happen, and they haven't. I think East Tampa and West Tampa have been left behind from our prosperity.
Mm-hmm.
I have a unique perspective on this.
Mm.
In 2004, I opened a company called In Town Homes.
Mm.
My office for 9 years was at the corner of Albany and Walnut in Old West Tampa.
Mm-hmm.
It's a community that is 90% Black and 60% people below the federal poverty guidelines. And I worked and spent the better part of my waking hours there and built affordable homes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm a white guy. I'm a big, tall, white guy for people.
You are, yes.
Yeah, I'm 6'5", 260 pounds.
Thank you for your stats.
Yeah. So when I would first open my office in that community, we were across from a drug hole. That was really a big problem. And when I first started walking and building homes there, we built a model center at the corner of Spruce and Albany.
Mm-hmm.
And we put a fence around it because we didn't know what would happen. Nothing happened. Mm-hmm. So we proceeded to build 50, 60 some odd homes in that neighborhood. Never put any security on it, nothing. Mm-hmm. In all that time, 3 or 4 years, we've never had an act of violence or
vandalism,
no vandalism, no theft. And when I first moved in that community and someone would walk up to me, a Black person, and it's like, a little nervous about that and what's going to happen. And, I guess that some people, and would you get panhandled or what? And except for one or two people, the question was, Mr. Ed, you got a job for me? Mm-hmm. And I developed incredible relationships with the homeowners in that community that were all Black, all elderly women. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they had husbands, sometimes not. But most of the homes were owned by elderly Black women. And I did everything we could to help them fix up their homes and stay in the neighborhood because they were the foundation for the neighborhood. Mm-hmm. My point of that whole story is that that was a transformational thing for this white guy. Mm-hmm. We don't usually talk about race in these terms, right? But we are still a segregated society. We may know people of color in different ways in different places, but a lot of people, particularly people of my complexion and experience, haven't had an experience like that. And it really changed me that all people want the same things in life. And I know that we're all supposed to feel that way, but it's a different thing to live it day in and day out with people that are different from you to come to love people, So I believe that whole swaths of people have been left behind, and it's just wrong. So I would like to use the power of the mayor's office to change that. Mm-hmm. So I have this thing called the New Day agenda, where will have within the mayor's office a person who is a senior policy person for diversity and inclusion. Mm-hmm. That's going to be asking the questions and stating the points in every decision we make that's major, from budget to policy to procurements. Are we thinking about diversity and inclusion for everybody, right? I want to and have a very aggressive housing program because it's a giant problem that's happening right now of people in transitioning neighborhoods can't afford to stay in their neighborhoods.
Absolutely.
So we need a broad range of market intervention by government to provide a range of housing solutions. And I mentioned one earlier, the GO plan will create thousands of new affordable units, not at taxpayer expense.
Now, let me just ask you real quickly, because I love people talking about affordable housing, but a lot of the things that I hear in these communities, aside from just housing, are access to quality food locations, that a lot of these neighborhoods are food deserts, meaning that, the only place you can go to get nutrition is a local store that might not have access to fruits and vegetables, or that they don't have access to Publix or, grocers that have fruits and vegetables. So aside from just talking about like affordable housing, what I'd like to see is people are talking about robust communities in general.
I agree.
With access to
totally agree
all
with
of
that.
the same things that other communities get when they build housing.
Well, I
plans.
think that in part comes with more robust redevelopment. The problem with redevelopment is that if it chases people out, it's socially unjust. So that's why you need to have this robust counter program to it, and it's built into progress.
Right.
The progress can't come at the expense of poor people. It just can't. And
Absolutely.
we need to get the math right on that. Also, helping low-income homeowners stay in their homes and improve their homes is a really big deal for me. I mean, that's a struggle, right?
Sure.
I want to introduce a very strong program called a 203K program, which is a person buys a house that's not in good shape, rehabs it, and then it's a house that is in good shape. And often, although the market's changing on this, we call it the pity index. Principal, interest, tax, and insurance payments on a house that gets done like that cost less than rent. So you take a family that's renting at $1,400 a month,
Sure.
create this program that has a lot of funding for it through HUD, and they get into a restored, renovated house, and maybe they're paying $700 a month.
Sure.
So there's a group of families that make enough money that they can do that. And so I want to have a very robust 203K program. I would like to create a local affordable housing trust fund. I have some ideas about that. Housing is just so important. So when it comes to this New Day agenda, it is dealing with those kinds of issues. Plus, I would like to create a downtown East Tampa, where there's a cultural and economic heart for East Tampa that includes things like grocery stores and shops. I think building place is really, really important for everybody.
Yes.
So I think I actually know how to do that one, given my development background. And there's a lot of wealthy Black entrepreneurs here that I think would be very interested.
Have you gone on Candy Lowe's Black Business Bus Tour before?
I have.
So what I'm going to kind of just try to sum up and kind of reword is, because I know that there are some people who might hear some of your words who, are younger social activists, and they might hear you say, oh, before he lived in or worked in this part of the city, he was, afraid of African-American people or working in this community or whatnot. Is that you were saying that, having this experience was so transformative for you, it made you more of an advocate for racial justice.
It did, and I really didn't mean it to say it. What people want is an opportunity to succeed,
right?
And I wasn't being panhandled. I was being asked for an opportunity.
Sure.
And that was the overwhelming request.
Right.
And
I think it's harder for younger people to understand that what you're saying is that, even though you grew up understanding that we're all equal, that everybody's equal, that, until you've had those experiences with people that you consider socioeconomically different or racially different or culturally different, until you've really had experiences where you can interact with people and see the areas where you're similar or how we're all the same in human, at our core, that, understanding it intellectually and then understanding it in an experience where, you build relationships with people is a different experience.
You used the right word, relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Too often in our society, our relationships don't sort themselves out to be diverse.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the most important thing I think the mayor can do.
Right.
Is break down the barriers between people that are erected because of race or ethnicity and establish relationships.
Or socioeconomics.
Or any of those.
Mm-hmm.
And establish relationships between human beings. That's the reason the Supreme Court in Brown versus Education said we're going to have busing. Because it understood that we had to break down these barriers that separate us.
Mm-hmm.
And I think our great hope, our society's great hope, is with the millennials, who, and maybe a little older than that have grown up in a more enlightened social environment.
Right.
Where there's a lot less prejudice. There's a lot less seeing people in terms of the color of their skin or their religion. They see people just as people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's refreshing.
But I mean, not necessarily on a national level with what we're seeing with who our president is and a revival of hatred.
That's very disturbing to me.
Yeah.
It's very disturbing.
And I want to be clear, and I just want to make sure you understand this as well, is that I think younger people don't necessarily see each other without skin color or the divisions, but what they do realize is that there's different levels of privilege and different experiences that people have, because I think younger people actually understand how society has divided us based on these things and accept each other and refuse to allow society to cause those divisions to happen, but are even more aware of, because of our past, the different privileges that we have and how we have to use those to advocate for each other. And, what you are talking about, it may not have the vernacular exactly how I think like the young social justice warriors would appreciate.
Right.
But I think that hopefully the sentiment is that you want to use your privilege, as an older white man with all of this experience in urban planning, to make sure that as mayor, you're going to have a platform that not only works for everybody, but also includes in the decision making and the policy making, everyone, and that there is someone advocating for diversity, and that your urban plan makes sure that it's incorporating and helping communities that have been forgotten or displaced or not made a priority because of racism or because of classism, a thriving priority in the city that you see.
Yeah. Thank you. Yes. We want transformation.
Right.
Let me just give you a simple example. Mm-hmm. The stability of center city neighborhoods is almost a block by block thing. You'll have 2 or 3 blocks where everything's peaceful and tranquil. Mm. And someone moves into rental housing. Mm. And they totally disrupt the neighborhood.
We have that here.
Well, that could be.
Yes.
But and I guess this is kind of the point that I was trying to drive at. Mm-hmm. If that happened in my neighborhood in South Tampa,
right?
It would never happen.
Right.
It would not be tolerated. It would be stomped down so vigorously by a whole combined set of forces.
Yeah.
But in Old West Tampa, when that would happen on a street, you went from sitting on your front porch to having your whole neighborhood change.
Right.
I fought that, tried to correct those things for 5 years that were disruptive like that. Mm-hmm. I never really understood that until I started building in-town homes. Mm. So I have a different view
sure.
about what it takes to build center city neighborhoods. It's prosperity is a double-edged sword in these neighborhoods. At one point, people want them lifted up, but when they get lifted up, then the people who live there can't afford to live there anymore.
Gentrification. People wanted to.
We need to resist that and guard against that. We have to have strategies to make these neighborhoods better.
Yeah.
The 203K mortgage program will do that. We'll take rental housing and turn into homeowner housing.
Right.
Another thing we haven't talked today is creating land trusts, which I wish we had done with in-town homes. I didn't even understand how those work. The city should have done that with the lots that they gave to domain homes, because you need to, you do an affordable home, and 10 years later, the people turn around and sell it, and they're selling it at what the market rate is. So you've lost that in inventory.
Yeah.
We should have land trusts where the government continues to own the property and allow limited appreciation.
Kind of like rent control in New York.
From an ownership perspective, but then you maintain this inventory in perpetuity. One of the things that has defined me, is I've tended to look long term.
Right.
So we need to have these set of strategies to ensure the prosperity of all our citizens and ability for them to stay in place.
Yeah, you have to start to address the systemic problems.
And not just tomorrow, but 5 and 10 and 15 years from now.
Sure.
So it's a pretty comprehensive long-term view of how you build a just, humane, and equitable city.
Right.
And I'm very jazzed about
trying
to do that and, work at it.
Yeah. Well, I think the key is, personally, and I'm certainly not the advocate for any of those communities, because, I live in Tampa Palms, although I did live in Sulphur Springs for a long time, is making sure that when you're rolling out these plans and you're talking about these ideas, like you said, you're engaging and allying and partnering with members of these communities. Absolutely. And making sure that they're part of your staff and your team, and, that you understand, because it's very complex. I mean, you talk about, making sure that these neighborhoods are safe, which everybody wants, but at the same time, there's an equitable criminal justice that happens. And you have to make sure that the justice system is fair and equitable again, because all of these problems that we're talking about have been systemic and long-standing because of policies dating back to Jim Crow era. So it's such a complicated thing that what I'm hoping and what I see is a lot of city council candidates that aren't in that community already, because we do have a good crop of candidates who represent those communities, are really, engaging with the members of those communities, like you said, long term, and not just to come up with buzzwords or, things to get those votes.
It's a fair share. I mean, that's the fair share of there's a lot of soundbite politicians around.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we're seeing at the national level, the whole government grinding down over, we got to build a wall or not build a wall. And it becomes, well, we got to do the soundbite, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
I'm not saying we. I mean, it's kind of what's driving.
Who's we, Ed? No,
yeah. It's what starts driving the agenda.
Yeah.
And we can't have that. We've got to be about sound policy, not sound bites.
Sure.
And you got to look behind these things. And that's why I said before on the education thing, what's the problem? Then what's the vision?
Right.
And let's work the problem to realize the vision and do it collectively and bring everyone in to achieve the vision. That is the summation of my approach to solving complex problems. And it is inclusive, it's engaging, and it's thoughtful, and it's honest.
I like the honest part. I mean, I like all of those, but the honest is my favorite. And inclusive. Well, we could talk forever, and we've already said we weren't going to do a long interview, but we've gone like 10 or 15 minutes over. So unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap it up, or else we're just going to have another 2-hour interview. But again, I appreciate you so much coming on and being transparent and answering any questions. Are you going to apply for the Progressive Caucus endorsement?
Sure, of course.
I just had to get that in there for myself.
And people can follow us on the Facebook.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
Our website is ed4mayor.com.
Okay. Yep.
And we have another website called Tampa 2020, which will have more and more details about the GO plan on it.
Are you active on Facebook or social media?
We are active on Facebook, Twitter to some extent. But
and if people want to get involved in your campaign, is it, are you looking for canvassers? Are you asking for donations? How are you trying to get people engaged?
You can go online donations, but I mean, we had 50 or 60 hardcore environmentalists at our campaign headquarters today. We believe in walking and talking, so we're going to be canvassing a lot.
Are you going to be canvassing Sulphur Springs?
We're canvassing everywhere. We are in Sulphur Springs today.
Good, because I've seen a lot of people asking about which candidates are going through that neighborhood specifically.
I think it's precinct 237 we were in today. I'm not sure.
Are you going to be in the Martin Luther King parade?
Oh, yes.
Awesome. Well, again, I appreciate it so much to all of the candidates that come on and take the time to drive out here and answer our questions. I wish you the absolute best of luck in your race.
Thank you.
Thank you again to all of our listeners. Sorry we had a long interview, but we really wanted to make sure that we covered all the topics that we know are important to you in selecting our next mayoral candidate. Please make sure that you like our Facebook page. You can always find our podcasts at www.reclaimingmymind.org. Make sure all your friends subscribe so they can hear all the next candidates coming on. And if you have any questions, you can always email me at jvaughn, V as in Victor, AUGHN, the number 30 at gmail.com.
It's been so refreshing to be able to have a long, detailed discussion about these issues. That's not a 30 second. Tell us your answer. Tell you how you're going to solve the problems of the world. Do it in 30 seconds or do it in a minute. I really appreciate the opportunity to have a dialogue about these things. So
absolutely.
Thanks much.
Yeah. And hopefully you'll share it because I can share it so much, but hopefully you'll get it out there. So thank you again. Wish you all the luck. Thank you to all of our listeners and have a good evening.